Do we have any questions from the floor? Or
Yeah,
Mark's
I got the
back
mic.
there. We already have some?
Richard Rolke with Dow Inc. So this is I'm manufacturing based, so this is probably more of a manufacturing type question, but open to any input. But so over the last 10 years or so, how has your talent acquisition process changed over this time period? You talk about this journey and where we were and where we're going now. Has your makeup of who you look for now different than what it was before?
Marty?
Yeah, I'll take a shot at that first, I guess. I think if you went back 10 years, we really looked for either OT security people or IT security people. There wasn't that much blending. One set tended to, wear black T-shirts and work in a SOC, and the other set wore hard hat and Nomex coveralls, right? I come from the Nomex coverall camp. When I see, job descriptions and that sort of thing that cross my desk in the last probably 2 years, I see a lot of blending. And I see human resources managers struggling to define what they want and what words they want to use. I know NIST has a lot of efforts going on with the NICE framework and how do we classify jobs. In the federal government, for example, I had to classify all of my staff in the ICS CERT into job categories for cyber, what cyber skills did they have? And it was an attempt by the federal government to try to bucket those things. So I do see there's a lot of changes going, but I still think we have a long ways to go. I think that we struggle with nomenclature and the words we use because engineers describe things different than business IT analysts kind of thing.
This might be a little bit flippant, but I'm going to say it anyway because I think it's right. I think 10 years ago and even today, it doesn't matter which side of the house you've sat on until today, I still fight for all of my resources, right? So the lack of cyber capabilities continues to grow because our need for cyber continues to grow. I think that from a Kohler perspective, a lot of our security practices on the OT side are still evolving from personnel on the floor already, right? So they've grown up in that space, and then we're educating them and creating career paths for them in the cyberspace. Whereas, in the IT space, in the recent past, we're often looking for people with certain sets of skills, and we're trying to bring them in ready to go and hit the ground. And I think those are two different approaches that we're still doing. I'll call it the older way of doing that. I do see in the IT space, though, at least personally, I would much rather hire someone with aptitude and get them in 6 months early and teach them some cyber skills, even junior skills, and bring them up in that environment rather than spending 9 to 12 months looking for that perfect person that's going to have all these skills. So, when I see kind of this, when I think of convergence, right, the way we did it before, we take personnel and we teach them security. I'm looking for people with aptitude in IT now, and I'll teach them security because there aren't enough of us on either side. So I see a convergence of our approaches. I think OT actually had the right approach for the longer time. I don't know.
I will say, Richard, that one of the things I've talked about it with people that work in your tech center is this idea that we have skilled people with IT skills, IT aptitude in our businesses and in our manufacturing operations. Those are great candidates to start moving into the cybersecurity world, right? And so we, as an organization, just need to figure out what's the best way to do that because they have a job already. And I'm talking about layering on top some things that they could do that would be very valuable to Dow, right, overall. So that's a conversation we'll continue to have, right?
So I'm going to add from my IC experience, the supply line's been an issue for a while, and it's not going to go away. And it's not simply the acquisition of talent, but the growth of your existing talent. That has got to be your mantra. And understanding that it's a very competitive market space. So you've got that driving as well. So the care and feeding of those you have in pocket better be primary in your thought as you're seeking to gain and acquire that talent that's coming out of school or that you're getting from other sources. The good news is there's a lot of energy today being poured into solutions on the outside across academia. So there's a recognition of the gap, and so you're seeing things happen. I was literally at the University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee, less than 2 months ago. Really great to see investment in an OT environment there, a laboratory environment that's cross-cutting from undergraduate all the way through postgraduate work. So that's encouraging. You say, great, we're developing that talent pool. However, we have to be mindful of continuing to grow from within because that's where the real solutions are going to come from.
Yeah, I just want to make I got to follow. I have this floor. I know Mark never wants me to have the floor. He wants to give it to. But no, I just wanted to follow up with that just because of the comment I made that I heard last year that I really liked. The thing I mentioned about cyber is a profession, saying people are cybersecurity. I think a lot of struggle, and I've heard it here, is, you need people in plants and you need people in data centers. And you probably need people who could work on either. And so there is that location issue, which somebody wants to be in a plant. I mean, I spent a lot of my life in plants, and I personally liked it. I enjoyed it, Other people would say, this last thing in the world I want to do is go to a plant. But I'm just curious if you're framing it from the perspective of saying, breaking it down into skills that would work in any place. There's cybersecurity skills. Now, there's skills like doing patches, implementing patches. You can probably train people in plants, maintenance people, and things like that to do that, and that's good. And they might be happy to do it. They might have a tendency towards, you always have the ones who like the IT, you have the ones who don't. So that's a natural for that. You probably aren't trying to train that person, though, to deal with all the issues that might occur. Just like you might have specialists with networks versus endpoints and Windows systems, that kind of stuff. And I'm just wondering if you are framing it from the perspective of cybersecurity as a profession. And one last comment was, the thing that really resonated with me last year was the fact that somebody said, and I don't remember, maybe it was you, maybe it was Don Capelli or who, but it was this thing of a career path. We always look at using the people rather than from the perspective of the person saying, I'll do that, but where do I go next? Because they want to grow. Nobody wants to just, I never wanted to just stay where I was. I wanted to grow.
I think it might have been Don, and I like this idea of a career path, but I'm gonna throw something out there. So your question, and maybe I didn't think of it largely enough, was around talent acquisition. One of the things that I've said previously that I absolutely believe, from an IT perspective, right, the way that we're good business partners is we go and sit with engineering and understand how they engineer. So this cross-functional education. One of the things that Kohler does really, really well, and I actually had a conversation in the past 2 months about this. We do a rotational program, right? And so our young and up-and-coming people, we put them in a 2-year rotation, and they'll spend a couple of months with multiple business groups in multiple places. And so I had a rotational come to me about a month and a half ago, and he was like, I'm not sure which one of these things I want to do. He was like, I really like the code development that happens on the application side. So this is my specific example. But I really enjoyed my time with your cyber team. And I know you both have spaces. And I looked him deadpan in the eye and said, find what you're passionate about. We have a career path for each of you, for either of those. But what we gave him was the opportunity. I said, listen, anything you can do to keep up with cyber makes you an amazing coder for us, right? Because you know what we're looking for. And if you decide to come to cyber, you are an amazing asset for cyber because you have the coding experience to help us talk better language with our partners. So, just something to throw out there for companies that maybe aren't quite where they want to be. A rotational program gives people the opportunity to experience each and to really start to understand the processes that we're trying to and the capabilities we're trying to build.
Mark?
Yeah, we have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
Shrik Sugur with Maxsure. This question is for Mandy and Dan. I'm going to ask a very provocative question. Is cybersecurity a misnomer, or is it more of a cyber risk? Is more of the question, because you mentioned you have challenges in terms of procuring talent and other resources. So that means it's more of the risk management question for the operational leadership and also the CFO, CEO, and the board members, rather than, as Sid said, that fixing patches and those kind of things. So is it more of a cyber risk management? And if it is so, how are you doing in your companies?
Well, so you're right. I mean, it is about risk management because you're not going to make the risk go to zero, not in today's world, right? And if you allow the risk to go to unconstrained, you're likely to find yourself in the headlines, right? So I mean, you need to manage the risk according to what you see in your industry, what kind of assets you have, and so you need to figure out the impact versus, right, your exposure and how much you're willing to spend, resources, technology, processes, all that stuff. So for Dow, that risk management now happens at our board level. Right? So cybersecurity is part of our corporate risk management portfolio. And so it comes up all the time at that high level. Now, that has to trickle down to, okay, where are we, right? According to that portfolio, has the risk at that level kind of raised because of recent events or because of the way the world's going, in which case our program has to raise. Now, we keep a steady state always, right? Like a police force, right? To guard our assets. But we need to ratchet it according to what that risk profile, that risk management decision is. So 5 years ago now, we had a assessment of our manufacturing cyber program by Lockheed Martin. And at the time, they were kind of in that business. They're no longer. The reason we chose Lockheed Martin was because we knew they represented the defense industrial base and that their need for protection, for cyber protection, was national security, right? And so Dow Chemical doesn't raise to well, it does if critical infrastructure, but it's not that level. But we wanted to measure ourselves against one of the best industries, or at least the most targeted, potentially national security concerns. So did we want to live to that level, right? Because we fell short in a lot of areas. Did we want to live up to that? Did we want to spend the money to become as good as Lockheed Martin was protecting, defense secrets? No. But we wanted to at least understand where we fit in that hierarchy and give our board a chance to see where we fit against the very best who had national secrets, right? National security secrets, and we also did a bunch of benchmarking against our peers. So your question is exactly right. I would argue that we're not as good at it as we should be. So we're constantly trying to figure out how do we make that discussion more fruitful. Right? How do we really characterize the risk that we're under, especially if nothing's happened in a while? I mean, that's always the problem, right? If there hasn't been any major incident in the news or Dow hasn't fought off some, then people think, oh, it must be getting better. And we know as professionals, right, that it's not getting better, right? To some degree, nothing has been successful lately. So we are still working on that, but you're framing it as risk management is exactly right.
Absolutely agree. And, I like your provocative question because I'm up here going, well, risk management is a subset of cybersecurity, but no, not really, right? Because risk management drives what we do within cybersecurity. So I like your question. I'm actually not sure what to do with that. So well done. What I would say is, NIST in their framework has risk management as one of their control families, right? And we also, at a board level, twice a year, I have to come with a heat map, and I have to identify my risk. And I have to list, my risk plane is actually 3-dimensional. We have our normal probability and impact, but then I do a third dimension around what's the attack surface. How big is that risk to us? Because, yes, we think our IP is really, really important, but that surface is only this big. But when I look at email protection and how much email we get every day, right, that risk is attack surface is much larger. So we do this risk framework, and then we use the NIST cybersecurity framework, which I think does an amazing job for us because it takes all of those components of cybersecurity, and it doesn't just ask you, do you do them? It really asks you to manage your risk based on your capabilities. So it's not quite a maturity model, but it says how well do you actually do that? And I really like that approach because it informs my strategic roadmap, right? So when I find out, oh yeah, we have a technology for data loss prevention, but I don't have a team running it, so our capability is really low, and that's a really big risk for privacy right now. So that then shoots up on my heat map really quickly. And so I think between those things, right, having a heat map, somewhat subjective, I'm working on some objectivity around it, but then using a framework like the CSF that monitors your capability, it really does inform my cybersecurity strategies. So, great question.
If I may, Sid. I think that one of the challenges we've had in OT for the past 20 years is we didn't manage that risk. I mean, so I'm a gray-haired automation engineer, and I can tell you that I went and bought the modem that I plugged into the VMS computer that, basically gave the entire distributed control system remote access. And I accepted that risk on behalf of the entire company as a 20-something-year-old automation engineer. The good news is that now boards of directors are looking their CISO in the eye, and they're saying, you need to explain to us where all this latent, technical debt, or it's almost the same concept, right? We've built up this risk debt over the years in the OT systems, and now we're finally getting the people, processes, and technology to give us visibility into where those risks are, and there's tools available to help you prioritize that risk so that you can steer the investment in the right way. So I think the two are inextricably linked.
And I think you bring up a really great point, something that I'm really challenging my business on, because this is where it's different for every single person in this room, is you have to challenge your business to define what the risk appetite is. Can you plug that bad boy in on behalf of our company? And are we willing to accept that risk? Or are we mitigating that risk? Do we transfer that risk, right? We know what the risk responses are, but asking the industry to come up with better definitions for defining our risk appetite so that we can go to our boards and say, this is kind of what this means in non-technical terms. How willing are you to accept the risk? Yep. We're much less likely to accept, Kohler, and Sid doesn't want me to tell you that he likes his showers at 102 degrees in the morning. So from a privacy perspective, they're not willing to accept risk on data, right? That's coming out of those systems. But we might be more than willing to accept some risks on a machine that we've segmented, we've isolated, we get it, but we are accepting that risk there. So getting your business to define what areas of cyber they're willing to empower you to accept risk on their behalf would be a really great next step.
And that's hard.
That's hard.
Really hard, and every company is going to have a different level of acceptance, right? Some will spend millions of dollars on people and technology to mitigate what other companies consider like, oh, that's like a minor risk, and we're going to self-insure.
Can I?
Last point is SEC came back in 2018. They published a guideline to quantify risk, cyber risk, and you have to inform the board on the quantification. It's a guideline, not a mandate. It's going to be mandated in the next 2 years, saying that every company has to do it. So S&P, Moody's, and Fitch, and all these rating companies, they're getting involved.
That's right.
We just had, Moody's was just here.
Moody's was here yesterday.
On Monday, we had Moody's do presentations. So thanks, you're aware of that.
And that's just great to his point, for those of you that didn't see Moody's and their conversation is, Moody's is now defining things that will actually, based on your probability of being potentially impacted by a breach, may degrade your rating with them. So cyber is becoming we have a serious voice at the table right now.
I just wanted I like your analogy, the 20-year-old engineer and all that. But the same thing, I happened to work for a company, and worked in the steel industry most in my early career. And I assure you that if the system was down, if the production stopped, and I said, well, I can't plug in this modem to connect it with the company, because of the policy, I would have been fired by the production manager. So risk is incredible. You can't just ask people, what is your risk
Our
tolerance?
paradigms have changed, right? So we're in a different place now than we were 20 years ago or more. But that's good, and I think that the conversation is good, and I think that the fact that we have such a significant seat and voice at the table in the boardroom of these, multi-billion-dollar companies is good.
But I still think it's not a simple question to ask somebody. It's at that moment in time, if you ask that production manager, what's your risk tolerance for cyber? I don't care about the cyber, Sid, just get the thing
the
on.
line up.
Absolutely. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, more questions.
Yeah, please.
Hi, my name is Chris. I'm with Fortinet. And my question relates to patching vulnerabilities in critical systems. And we've long accepted near to release of a patch for a vulnerability, we apply it to our IT systems. And sometimes we don't do the same thing with our OT systems. I have been evangelizing that patching vulnerabilities in OT systems is predictive maintenance.
Is what?
Predictive maintenance, and should be treated as such. And so I was wondering if you agree with that statement and how you balance your need for near continuous uptime with patching vulnerabilities that can lead to unplanned downtime.
So I'll take a shot at that. I mean, I certainly have, at full disclosure, I'm the vulnerability management vendor here, right? I've used the term cyber maintenance. I think that when you talk to OT people and you try to explain to the financial people around the OT system that this is no different than changing the packing in a pump or greasing the bearings on a machine, a rotating machine, right? You need to spend money in cyber maintenance. You don't just buy the computer or the technology and install it and expect it to just work. And I think it's similar to we just bought a new car. Our car, there's no way I can change the oil maybe, but the rest of it is got to be done, by some type of professional. So there's some sort of cyber, automotive maintenance procedures, right? So I like the term. I'm not sure if it's preventative, predictive, reactive. It depends on how you're deploying that, right? But ultimately, patch management is different in OT. I think that we need to recognize, so first of all, I think that you have to have visibility into where your vulnerabilities and weaknesses lie, regardless of if you're going to make the decision to patch immediately or not. So you need to have the instrumentation in place to be able to tell you, are all of these OT devices current, or are they firmware out of date? Are there known CVEs and vulnerabilities? Are those vulnerabilities being exploited in the wild by threat actors? And your systems and your people should then be able to use that information to prioritize which things you're going to look at first. And in general, from my experience, the further down in the Purdue level you get, the closer to the sensors and the valves and the motors you get, the longer time frame it's going to take you to do those patches, right? There's going to be maintenance windows, there's going to be lockout tagout, there's going to be all kinds of issues that you have to take into consideration. The closer you get to the perimeter and the internet and your business systems, the faster you should be at patching and reacting to known issues or known vulnerabilities. So it's got to be as scalable, and you have to have it across the entire enterprise. You can't put a solution in place that just looks at your IT vulnerabilities or just looks at your OT vulnerabilities. You need to be able to see that across the entire enterprise to be able to make a decision at the CISO level. Well, do I invest more in updating that Windows XP set of machines, or do I do something on the business network that might be a similar cost? And it's a trade-off. You've got to look at each line item, right? So if you can highlight the risk on the OT side is more important, more higher risk to the company, then you'll get the funding to do that, upgrade, to move you to the next version.
I think I need to buy his analogy book because I really like them. And
I have a book signing later.
and I'm going to say Sid's going to be really mad at me because I don't have a solution to this one, right? So he said we were supposed to have solutions. You know, I absolutely agree with you, but I come from the IT side, so it's faster and it's easier for me. The problem that I'm trying to solve to, and what the business tends to accept as a risk, is that the lower down the model you go, you don't have the redundancy. You don't have a testing environment to check that the patch is going to work and not bring the line down for much longer than the change window. Why not? Well, because it costs $1 million, right? And so the business goes, you know what? I'm willing to accept the risk that, you know what? I should get my 36,000 mile car maintenance, but I bet I can make it to 72. And, you know, total cost of ownership may be different, but it's a decision they're making because they don't have the money for their 36,000 mile, you know, maintenance, and they don't want to create a test environment because it's very costly to them. And so I don't have a solution. Again, great question. Absolutely agree we should do it, but as we move forward, what I would say is you talk to your business and they're propagating new machines and new lines, we need to have as a gate before they go to production a mechanism by which we can do patching. So we might not be able to solve for everything we've done to date, but moving forward, it should absolutely be one of those non-negotiables, because if not, we're gonna find ourselves in the same situation and going, why is that happening?
The only thing I'd add to the analogy is for Dow, at least most of our businesses, it's our car, but we're driving it 99% of the time. I mean, it's never in the garage. It's not parked. It's moving, right? And so that's another thing I thought. But I agree. I mean, Marty said it very well. The visibility, the understanding of what the risk, and as the risk starts to grow over time, right? For the, you know, there's a vulnerability, you know, that's known. Now it's being, you know, kind of exploited. Well, now we've seen it go into a system that we have, right? Not at Dow, but somewhere else. That all those are indicators. Just like if a pump starts vibrating funny, right? And then it starts acting fun. You know, I mean, those are all the things we use for predictive or preventive maintenance. We got it. We have to have that information, and so that's critical. And then you have to balance that risk versus, okay, do we have a plant maintenance window coming up, or is it serious enough that we have to force a window to open, right? And we go to our business leaders and explain to them why. And at the end of the day, they make the call. All we can do is explain the risk and what the impact will be if the risk in fact comes true.
I love the vibration analogy. I'm gonna change my analogy now to include vibration analysis, because you're right. Sometimes when the pump is shaken, or we get the indicators on the vibration analysis system that it's going to fail. We know it's going to fail, and it's going to fail in the next 48 hours. There's some similarities on cyber, right? You know, when the bad guys are knocking at your door and there's an exploit in the wild and you have perimeter-facing devices that are vulnerable to that, you better fix that, right? And you'll take a downtime outage to do it. You just haven't made that decision yet, but I think you will make the decision to shut down to fix those things.
Except people will discount the probability. My experience is people will discount the probability of the cyber attack much more. They understand
Probability
pumps.
equals 1.
No, they understand
Likelihood
vibrations and they get it.
Not so
That's
much
the
anymore,
value.
Sid.
Really?
You know, we have scared the crap out of people enough, I think, and there's been some scary stuff out there.
I'm glad to hear. You know, my experience, though, again, industry was from the steel industry, which is pretty much run by mechanical engineers. And they understand pumps, they understand motors, and if they see something wrong there, it just piques their interest, and they're saying, oh, that's serious, I'll shut it down. But we don't have cybersecurity people running it, so they just say, oh, that's not going to happen. Forget it.
But I think too, Sid, ask companies like Maersk what their
I know.
probability or likelihood was, and what the cost of that incident was post-incident. And when I ran the DHS program, my guys would find all the time that in most cases, it was at least an order of magnitude cheaper to defend it up front than to try to clean it up afterwards. I mean, an order of magnitude, that's a big number no matter how big or small
Whatever
your
the
beginning
number
number.
is, yeah.
And I'm not saying we win the argument every time, Sid. So you're right. I mean, you know, there will be an argument. You got to balance the risk versus the, you know, the cost of knowing if I shut down, I know what that cost is. You're telling me there's a risk that I might get shut down by some malicious actor. You know, that's a maybe, but we need to be able to express what that risk is. We need to be able to explain that in terms that a manufacturing leadership can understand. We're getting better. We still have more work to do.
Just out of curiosity, and I don't think you reveal anything, but what's a typical kind of cost per hour, revenue loss per hour for a typical Dow plant?
Oh, it really, yeah.
Depends on the line.
I mean, it varies way too much, or is it's really high? I have no doubt in my mind.
Yeah, to a planned outage or an unplanned outage?
No, I mean, no, I'm just saying if you had an accident and you lose 8 hours of production, I mean, that is a major, again, and I know anybody here that's worked in plants, you know, I just remember everybody coming up and pacing behind me when I used to, as a young engineer, say, you got it fixed yet? You got it fixed yet? They would have paid anything to have it fixed. They were losing a fortune.
Yeah, I don't know if you can characterize it so broadly where, you know, there's just one magic number, but I mean, I got drilled into me. There are 1,440 minutes in every day. And I knew that because I had to go and explain to the mill manager what every single minute of downtime that was attributed to process control, you know, what I did about it and how it's not going to happen ever again, right?
So that, yeah, but anyhow, it's a hard thing to justify in any case. Yeah.
More questions.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry, we forgot you were out there.
Hi, my name is Dimitris. I'm from a company called Rycom. So, you know, I've been to a bunch of the sessions about cybersecurity and the IT and OT convergence, and we're talking about what we're dealing with today. But what I'm really curious about is how you're affecting the manufacturing or the designing component and building security into whatever you're delivering to the market. That I'm very interested in because that's going to affect us the next 5 to 10 years.
I think it goes to my guardrails, right? So one of the things that we're asking, and it's gotten better over the last, I'd say, 2 to 3 years, is, you know, the OT side, the manufacturing side, can't go live with things until it's had a cyber review, right? And that might be as simple as, you know, understanding our risk, understanding what it is that we're putting into production so we have the visibility, and then doing it anyway. So let's be fair, right? I mean, we're evolving, but what I'm finding is, and what I've given my team as, you know, one of our objectives is, I need a list to give to the plant so that they can move as fast as they need. Here are the non-negotiables. You must have, the critical security control benchmark for ICS at 70% or higher, right? And any exceptions you need to have listed. That's non-negotiable to me, right? There may be exceptions, it might be 65, but we'll have those listed out. We'll know what's tuned wrong or differently, not wrong. And so that list for them, and then the list of, and these are the, you should do these, and those guardrails allow that team to move without us and to shift left so that when they're, you know, we did this most recently, we were looking at 2 or 3 vendors and they used our guardrails as part of our RFP process, and we knocked 2 vendors out because they couldn't meet our must-dos, right? Like, and so we're informing because we're giving them, these are the capabilities that we need to be able to do to make this a reliable system long-term. So starting to get the right vernacular, the right guardrails, because most of our OT partners want to do the right thing. They just don't know what it is for us or what our expectations are. So it's being really good partners.
Solution longevity, we talked about it before. You know, certainly it starts with visibility, but when you're working with a manufacturer, you have to understand that they're not all created equal. So you're starting with a need to understand their present state of maturity, because you're not coming in and holistically treating the problem. You're dissecting and understanding where the pain points are. So, you know, establishing different tiers of a solution strategy make a whole lot more sense. So I may have established and understood my visibility situation. It's still dynamic, right? And I want to be able to scale on that one. But I have to get down to understanding how to control an event, whether it's an adversary breaking through or a sequence of errors happening, say at layer 2.5 or 3.5 in my architecture. got to be able to control that activity. So segmentation, microsegmentation starts to play a big role. And you're just doing sensible things like multi-factor authentication so you can actually control those activities and not allow east-west, northwest activity, which then starts to escalate. Because as soon as I'm not containing that, I'm in a chase mode. And that's where numbers get large. Marty talked about that $500 million mark. That's becoming typical when your cyber situation scales. I'm your adversary. I'm running a multi-threat attack. I've disabled your ability to even track where your product's going. So not only are you producing a product that's going out the door and you have to do a recall, you can't control the range of the recall, so the escalation and the cost to the company goes up big. That's consequence management. Sitting on boards, it's unique every time because their value systems are different. But you really have to understand how much tolerance, how much risk or consequence tolerance are they willing to absorb? And that's really the make break. And the ultimate goal, of course, is to reach that point of automated awareness where I say now you're getting actionable intelligence. You're taking and tracking that behavior, and you're doing it at a speed that allows you to sustain safe operations, not fall into a zone. Trisus Triton was a great example, right? It showed how to compromise safety instrumentation. Wow, that's left a boom for the operational technology world. So you have to, again, it's a balance.
Just to follow up real quickly. I like the point that I think, I don't know who made it. Maybe it was, I'll give Marty credit. No, I don't know. All right. No, but it had to do with the comments. Mandy is the one that gets the credit. No, it was.
It was Mandy and Marty. How's that?
No. It was the comment about, and I think it's very true, there's a lot of IT equipment where you'll have a backup or a duplicate system where you can go and test the patch and you drastically increase the chance of avoiding a mistake. And I'm just curious, I know the control systems and all the challenges, but I'm asking Dow mostly here. When Dow is buying new equipment, it would seem to me that the ability to maintain it patch-wise could be something that could be designed in. And I think that's kind of his question in a way. I'm not sure, but are you doing that? Because it's something that's like, one thing is to say these are the security requirements, you have to design it this way, but a security requirement could be redundancy for the purpose of patching, not just redundancy for the purpose of reliability or whatever.
Yeah, so for us, that is becoming a much more important thing for our critical control platforms. We have built testing labs and we have ways to test, it's not redundancy for the systems out in production, but we are not releasing production patches into the wild without doing testing, making sure that the vendor has tested it and that we do some testing in our environment. So we've invested that way in our most critical control platforms, right? The ones that are the lifeblood of the company. Your point about moving through the supply chain and now we are having conversations. It's interesting the kind of conversations you get into when you start thinking about the supply chain for OT, right? Because it's Microsoft and it's Intel and it includes ARM and it includes all the people that are building the building blocks. And we'd really like to get them to put cybersecurity on their radar because everything they do ripples down to us and makes it less work for us to try to recover from some vulnerability that was left open. Right, so we are actively doing that, but that's a long haul. And hopefully, right, there's enough noise now that we're not the only one, right? There's a lot of people raising that issue to those kind of companies. And the big ones, Intel and Microsoft, are actually investing quite a bit, right? We're a little worried about the smaller companies, right? So.
My optimistic self says that someday OT vendors will release patches on a 2-week cycle like we do in IT, right? Just push them down from the cloud and fix it. I know that's very optimistic, not very realistic in today's environment, but imagine a world where we treated OT capabilities, that's a must-do. If we all said this is a must-do and didn't accept some of those risks, maybe we'd get there faster. Just being a little provocative there. We'll get there.
One more
Mark,
question.
you got one more question?
No.
Okay.
One more question. It's a comment for Mandy is that for me, I've listened to you speak a couple of times, and I think that you're a inspirational leader who thinks differently, and that you clearly are thinking about your people and you're thinking about the processes, and the way you speak about your team is just uplifting, right? And so now, here's the disclosure part. I've been working and selling into security for 28 years of my life, and I've worked for product vendors. And what you said earlier from the perspective of thinking and getting away from the product and looking at what you have to do to be able to secure your environment is really inspirational to me, because what I've been trying to do with customers for a long period of time is to start to get them to think differently from the perspective of, why are you looking at buying a firewall, right? It doesn't make sense to me as a firewall vendor why you're asking me to buy a firewall. I know that that sounds counterintuitive, but it's not. They're not addressing people or process. So where the question comes in is that I didn't hear a lot of talk about culture, but what you were talking implied to me cultural shifts within your business and the way that you're handling and managing your people, and within the people that you manage today, clearly there's going to be people that operate from the perspective of, oh, I'm just going to replace like for like, and from a people manager and the way that you're dealing with it. And this is really being addressed to everybody, is that in my 28 years of selling security relative to IT and OT systems, it seems to me that we make the same mistakes over and over again because it's human nature for us to do this, and that we don't seem to learn from those mistakes. So if we fast forward 10 years from now, Mandy, specifically to you, if we continue to take your inspirational lead to influence the industry, how do we get to that change where we're really thinking about people and process and culture? Because I don't think it has anything to do with technology. Technology is always a part of the solution. So it's really people, process, and culture. And how do we get people to, like yourself, to influence everybody else to start thinking differently? And the last question, and I have 15 different more questions after this, I'm just joking, but the last question is, when I go into a customer and I say, why are you making a decision on a firewall? And I want to push them back towards people and process. More often than not, I'm pushed into, no, we just want to buy a firewall. Don't try to back me up in process. How do I change that from your viewpoint and then everybody else's viewpoint?
Wow. Your question yesterday was really thought-provoking too. This is great.
All right, you need 30 seconds to answer that.
I get 30 seconds. Woo! Let's go. So you're right. Kohler actually brought me in at the beginning of culture transformation, right? We are a traditional manufacturer. We all know what that means. A lot of top-down, driving hierarchical decisions down. And, I treat my team. So I took a call today, and this is more than 30 seconds, but I'm going to tell you. I took a call today. They said, we have a request that went straight to my CIO to allow a service account we have a service account on a laptop that is just displaying a dashboard, and they wanted to turn off auto lock because auto lock is part of our standard laptop process. And this, because it was not, because it's against policy, went straight to the CIO. And I said, are you kidding me? Like, we spent all this, we're spending these cycles instead of just saying, hey, people, let's look at the process. If we know that our policy is X, which is auto lock, but we have business as usual exceptions, why isn't that part of our process? And I don't even need to be the approver, right? It certainly doesn't need to go to my boss, but I don't need to be the approver either. My leadership team knows what I expect of them because we have good processes. So, great point about culture. You have to enable those teams, and they will be more engaged, and you will retain them. From a vendor perspective, wow, to say that somebody goes, I just need it. Can you give me the list? Because I need to go have a conversation with those customers that are just saying, give me the firewall. Oh my goodness. Digital twins, maybe. But, the long and short of it is, you really have to, I take this to heart. I try never to have lunch alone. I know that sounds weird, but every single day I am meeting with a business partner to set realistic expectations with them. We talked about being realistic. I can't boil the ocean, but when my business starts to understand that, you know what, I know you hate our identity system. I know you hate it every single day of your life, but I'm not gonna give you a new identity system for you to hate again. I'm gonna take an extra year to be thoughtful and to give you something that's user-friendly. And those are the conversations I'm having at lunch so that when I make that decision, they understand what's driving me to do it, and it's for their benefit. So as security professionals, I highly recommend, And we talk about being business partners, but go and tell them why you're thinking what you're thinking versus it being an edict from cybersecurity. Be good partners.
Okay, I guess that's it then. My boss back there just said this is it. Anyhow, I want to remind you to do the survey if you could, but anyhow, join me in thanking the panel.